Every civilization that has ever existed had rituals. Ceremonies to connect with the gods, to deal with death, to make sense of suffering. Most of them were beautiful. Some of them were extraordinary. And some of them were so deeply strange, so genuinely disturbing, that historians spent centuries looking the other way. These are those ones, starting with the strange and ending somewhere you won't forget. Number 10, Sati, India. In parts of India, for centuries, when a husband died, his widow was expected to climb onto his funeral pyre and burn with him. Sometimes she went willingly, believing it was her duty, her devotion, her path to honor in this life and the next. Sometimes she was carried. The practice was called Sati, named after a Hindu goddess, and it was documented as far back as the 4th century BC, practiced across generations, across dynasties, across the full sweep of Indian history until the British colonial government banned it in 1829. Even that ban became its own argument, whether it was a genuine humanitarian intervention or a colonial power using a convenient moral position to assert control over a culture it didn't understand, a debate that historians still haven't finished having. What is not debated is the last recorded case. It was 1987, a village in Rajasthan. An 18-year-old woman named Roop Kanwar, widowed after 8 months of marriage, burned on her husband's pyre while hundreds of people watched. Whether she chose it or was forced into it was disputed immediately and has never been fully resolved. India passed a specific law against it that same year. The practice that began before the birth of Christ ended, officially, 37 years ago. Number 9. The Scythian cannabis ritual, Central Asia. Around 440 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus witnessed something among the nomadic Scythians of Central Asia that he felt compelled to write down in detail, because he clearly couldn't quite believe it himself. The Scythians would erect small felt tents, crawl inside, place red-hot stones in the center, and throw hemp seeds directly onto the stones. Then they would sit in the smoke until, in Herodotus' own words, they were howling with pleasure. This wasn't recreation, it was a religious ceremony, a deliberate attempt to contact the spirit world through altered consciousness. Herodotus personally witnessed it and recorded it, making it one of the oldest documented descriptions of a drug ritual in human history. Archaeologists excavating Scythian burial sites have since found the actual braziers and hemp seeds, exactly where Herodotus said they would be. He wasn't exaggerating. Number 8. Ancient Egyptian execration rituals. If you had an enemy in ancient Egypt, you didn't confront them. You wrote their name on a clay pot or shaped a small wax figure in their likeness. And then, in a ceremony conducted by priests, you smashed it or melted it while reciting specific words designed to bring misfortune, illness, or death to the person named. These were called execration rituals, and archaeologists have found thousands of them, buried beneath temple floors, hidden inside tombs, tucked into walls. The targets range from foreign rulers to rival priests to, in several cases, entire cities. What makes these genuinely unsettling isn't the ritual itself. Cursing enemies is a very human impulse. It's the sheer industrial scale of it. This wasn't a fringe practice. It was a recognized, professionally administered service that ran continuously for centuries. Number 7. Roman Lupercalia. Every February in ancient Rome, priests would sacrifice goats in a cave on the Palatine Hill, smear the blood across the foreheads of 2 young men, then wipe it away with wool soaked in milk. The young men would then cut strips from the goat skins, run nearly naked through the streets of Rome, and strike anyone they passed with the strips. Women didn't run from them, they lined up. The belief was that being struck made you fertile, and the festival was so genuinely popular, so embedded in Roman life, that it survived for centuries after Christianity became the official religion of the empire. Some historians believe it eventually evolved into what we now call Valentine's Day, which is either a fascinating historical footnote or the most disturbing origin story for a greeting card holiday ever discovered, depending on how you look at it. Number 6. Spartan Crypteia. In ancient Sparta, when a young soldier in training reached a certain point in his education, he was sent out alone into the countryside at night with nothing but a knife. His task was to kill helots, the enslaved people who worked the land Sparta depended on. He was expected to move in secret, avoid detection, and return without anyone knowing what had happened. This was not a punishment. It was a graduation ceremony, officially sanctioned by the Spartan state, considered an honor to be selected for. It served 2 purposes simultaneously: hardening the young soldier by making him kill in cold blood, and maintaining a continuous state of terror among the helot population to prevent revolt. The young men who completed it were considered ready. The ones who were caught or who failed were not spoken of. Number 5. The Aztec death whistle. The Aztecs made ceramic whistles shaped like human skulls, and for centuries after they were first discovered by archaeologists, they sat in museum drawers unlabeled because nobody was entirely sure what they were. Then someone blew one. The sound that came out has been described by every researcher who has heard it as one of the most viscerally disturbing sounds a human being can produce. A high, shrieking wail that sits at exactly the pitch and frequency that triggers an immediate fear response in the human brain, like a scream that doesn't belong to anything alive. They were used in death ceremonies. Some researchers believe that sacrificial victims were given one to blow as they walked toward the altar, so that the sound of human screaming filled the plaza before the ceremony began. When modern recordings of the whistles were played to test subjects who didn't know what they were hearing, almost every person reported feeling immediate physical unease. The Aztecs knew exactly what they were doing. Number 4. Mayan Bloodletting Ceremony. In Mayan civilization, the most powerful act a ruler could perform in public was not a military victory or a construction project. It was bleeding. Kings and queens would stand in the central plaza in front of thousands of people and pierce their own tongues, ears, or genitals with stingray spines or obsidian blades, collecting the blood on sheets of bark paper. The paper was then burned, and the smoke was believed to carry their words directly to the gods. The more important the occasion, a coronation, a time of drought, a request for victory in war, the more severe the piercing. Queens performed the ceremony alongside their husbands. The crowds gathered to witness it not in horror but in reverence, because what they were watching was their ruler demonstrating, in the most literal possible way, that they were willing to suffer on behalf of their people. The blood on the altar was proof. Number 3. The Greek Pharmakos. When ancient Greek cities were struck by plague, famine, or disaster, and needed someone to blame, they had a formal process for it. A person would be selected. Usually someone already living on the edges of the community, a beggar, a criminal, someone considered disposable, and the entire collective misfortune of the city would be ceremonially transferred onto them. They were then either driven permanently out of the city or killed. The community watched this happen and went home feeling that something had been done, that the balance had been restored, that the disaster would now lift. The word scapegoat traces directly back to this practice. What makes it genuinely disturbing isn't the act itself. Humans transferring blame onto individuals is something we recognize immediately. It's that it was not considered cruel or unjust. It was considered a civic function, as necessary and as normal as maintaining the roads. Number 2. Viking ship burial with human sacrifice. In 922 AD, an Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadlan was traveling through what is now Russia when he witnessed a Viking chieftain's funeral and wrote down everything he saw. The ceremony lasted 10 days. A slave woman had volunteered, or been selected. Ibn Fadlan isn't entirely clear on the distinction, to accompany her master into death. In the days before the burial, she was moved between the chieftain's men in a series of rituals, given drink, kept in a state of altered consciousness. On the final day, she was lifted 3 times above a wooden frame to see over into the afterlife, and she described what she saw each time. Then she was taken onto the ship, where her master's body lay, and the ship was set alight. Ibn Fadlan records the smoke, the sound, the heat. He records what the Viking standing beside him said as it burned. His account survived, was copied, and sits in archives today. One of the most detailed eyewitness descriptions of a human sacrifice ever written, by a man who clearly didn't know he was about to witness one when he arrived. Number 1. The Fore people and Kuru. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, the Fore people practiced mortuary cannibalism, consuming their deceased relatives as an act of love. Women and children ate the brain and organs. Men ate the muscle. The belief was that eating the dead kept their spirit alive within the community, that allowing a body to simply rot in the ground was the thing that was cruel, the thing that was wasteful, the thing that failed the person who had died. In the 1950s, something began happening in Fore communities that nobody could explain. People started losing muscle control. They would begin laughing, not from happiness but involuntarily, uncontrollably, and then deteriorate steadily over weeks and months until they couldn't walk, couldn't eat, couldn't speak, and died. Scientists named the disease Kuru. It took years of fieldwork and one of the most unusual investigations in medical history to identify the cause. The disease was a prion, the same class of pathogen responsible for mad cow disease, and it was being transmitted through the consumption of the brains of those who had already died from it. Each generation was unknowingly passing it to the next through the ritual itself. By the time the connection was identified and the practice stopped, thousands of people had died. The last known death from Kuru was recorded in 2009. The incubation period can be up to 50 years, which means someone alive today may still be carrying it. Every single one of these rituals made complete sense to the people performing them. They weren't primitive. They weren't cruel for the sake of cruelty, most of them. They were doing what humans have always done, trying to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense, trying to contact something larger than themselves, trying to protect the people they loved and honor the people they'd lost. The disturbing part isn't that they did these things. It's how recently some of them stopped. And it's the quiet, uncomfortable question that sits underneath all of it. How certain are we, really, that nothing we do now will look exactly this strange to the people who come after us?